You're listening to the Lumina Podcast by Ad Valorem, where we shine a light on tax, business strategy, and personal wealth.
From running a business to planning your future, we bring real-world insight to help you stay ahead.
Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to episode 2 in our Lumina podcast series. This is where we talk about specialist services, smarter strategies, and how to really drive business performance.
And today's episode is a really great one for leaders and managers. We're talking about all things about how to manage staff productivity, what operational metrics really actually matter.
And today we're joined by Neil Woolmer, our Group Operations Director. And Neil, what do you do all day? What's your day job?
What do I do? Where to begin? So, as the Group Operations Director, I work very closely with the heads of department to oversee all commercial delivery aspects of services to the clients that Ad Valorem provide. In doing that, I focus very much on the people management side of things, looking at commercial outputs for the business, and ultimately ensuring that everyone's on board with the journey, where we want to go, why we want to go there, and ultimately focus on the individuals that make up the teams to make sure that as a collective we are delivering the best outputs that we can for the business.
Yeah, I think particularly, obviously we're in acquisition mode, so I think that never is more important. I think when you've got a new acquisition coming through, and the people part is so essential to get right, isn't it? And I think, I know you and I both share that passion for delivering a great service through people, and operationally, I think what you've brought from the recruitment industry, which is doesn't have a great reputation always.
No, not on front.
Yeah, but I think what it brings is the commercial aspect of it. So
I think that's really important. And as I say, I think as practices become businesses, which sort of is really off the back of the cloud adoption, it's meant business practices can become more scalable and hence have to adopt business mentality. One of the big advantages for us is bringing people from outside industry in to just ask those simple questions, why? And certainly you've done that with us.
Yeah.
We've scratched our heads and said, well, that's because that's how we've done it for the last 24 years.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the way forward now. And we've certainly felt that impact. So, I mean, how do you define good performance in a team?
I think everything should be worked backwards from the desired outputs and outcomes that you want to achieve. And I think if you start there, you can reverse engineer everything in a way that helps you get to those outputs. And I think the accounting industry as a whole, certainly from my experience, is probably a little bit further behind than some other sectors in achieving that. I think there's often a focus on just doing the work. What I try and achieve with the guys is to get them, like you said, to ask why we do things a certain way and follow that up with further curiosity. I think curiosity and indeed inquisitiveness and a need to understand what a client is actually looking for opens up a hell of a lot of opportunities really for us to further enhance the services that we provide for people. I think that outputs and outcomes should be based upon the answers to the questions that you will get by asking clients those questions. And I think that in the industry in itself, we don't do enough of that. And I think what we're achieving at Ad Valorem at the minute is really a surge forward in enabling and empowering people of all levels within the business to possess those skills, really, to have that in their armory, to say to clients, look, what do you want? What do you want to achieve as a business? What do you want from us? How can we help? And I think if you sit back in a meeting and ask that question, you probably find that a client will tell you quite a lot about what it is that they want to achieve. And you're armed, therefore, with a lot of information as to how you can support them. And the outcome from that is obviously only good things. It can mean enhanced performance from us. It's good for Ad Valorem. We're able to give more expertise in the areas that we want, and the client will come away a lot more satisfied with the service that we can provide.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen, obviously, the more collaborative, almost collegiate approach that you've brought to the practice has not only helped, or the business, I should be saying, has not only helped us in terms of develop the business and push it forward, but I've seen the growth from the team just from hearing a voice and then being able to actually respond to your comments and themselves develop as a result. It's a lot more that softer side of accounting, which you don't tend to get. I mean, I hate to say it, but us accountants aren't necessarily the best people in the world. And certainly having yourself and Nikki.
And I think it's looking at the difference between somebody who's technically very highly skilled but maybe potentially not as great with the people side of things, and how you marry them up with somebody that is very good at client facing, because I think we have a huge variety of people within our practice who have all different skill sets, and I know you and I really champion that in the business. What do you think is the key metric? What would you say to any other sort of business owner, practice owner who's trying to deliver a high performing team? How do you balance that?
To be honest, I would say that it's a pretty big crime to have technically gifted people, but to not have them not on show, so to speak, but to have them be able to peacock that level of expertise to their clients by simply just doing as they're told. I think we should be encouraging people to be asking those questions in order to unlock that level of expertise so the client can benefit from it. There are all sorts of different personalities in all sorts of different sectors. Like you say, there are people in the accountancy practicing world who have a bit more of a flair for clients, but I would say they're on the lesser side. I think there's quite a lot of people that are quite keen to make sure that they've got everything right, they've got everything done on time. They just do what is expected of them, and that's it. And that's not necessarily being, critical of them, but I think the role that I play, one of the roles that I play with the guys at Ad Valorem, is to challenge them to be better for their clients. You are very good at what you do. Sometimes they need a bit of a confidence pick me up. People are sitting around and going they're great, and they've got no idea that they're great because they're not being told they're great. And on the flip side, they're not necessarily being challenged to improve on areas that they need to improve on. So if you've got clients that are crying out for help, and we can do that, but no one's actually said anything, then the client's going to remain unaware unless they're particularly vocal in what they need. And I for one think that level of forwardness should come from us as the provider of the service, as opposed to expecting the client to tell us what they want. I think whether it's me, whether it's the accountants, whether it's the directors in the business, we all possess a varied skill set. Telepathy is not one of them. So unfortunately, so we need to put the front foot forward and say, look, this is what we can do. What do you need? And we need to apply our skill sets accordingly.
Do you think it's sometimes easy to fall in the trap of looking at metrics? Particularly, I think in accounting, we're quite geared to looking at metrics all the time and KPIs, and people are not an exact science, are they? So it's quite often it's just how you match them together that's the skill, really. I think
if you've got the right set of KPIs in place, that's one thing, and that usually comes with them being it's a bit cliched, but simple and not a lot of them. That's one thing to put them in place. But I think if you're not getting everyone in the business to understand why they're in place and why they're important and what benefit it brings, you're on a bit of a hiding to nothing, because eventually people will just go, well, I'm just doing this for the sake of satisfying that report turns green, or that someone says, well done, that KPI is correct. Eventually it'll become quite soulless and meaningless. You need them to understand why it's happening, and in order to do that, you need to build that level of communication so that they get it. And that's from trainee to head of department, director, partner. There needs to be a collaborative approach so that everyone's owning their own piece, so that in the greater goal is achieved. But again, it's fantastic having all those goals, but if no one understands why they're there, and then it's not going to work. And I think the real challenge comes when people accept that, and that you have to find a way to get the different personality types to understand why it's important. Some people hear things and they go, oh yeah, totally get that, understand. Yep, that motivates me. And some people can be they'll need several layers of the onion peeled back in order for them to understand it and see why it's important.
Yeah. So I think it's probably fair to say when you came in you came in originally in a sales role,
Yes,
and then
my sins.
I think we both realised that actually your skills were really going to be very well suited to operation because it really is that marriage of people and systems and outputs to customers.
But I think that
But
sales,
sorry, I was just
for me, I think that sales thing was really important as well in terms of, you know, being in a leadership role. I think with because you can marry the commercial aspects to it.
I was going
Yeah.
to say was that I think there was a few eyebrows raised when you were put into a group ops director role when you're not an accountant.
Yeah,
Because it's kind of unheard of. It's kind of unheard. And you did. How could you chat through how you overcame the skepticism?
Yeah,
you
there was
say? Yeah.
skepticism really, and to be honest, I kind of embraced that because I think one of the things that I personally get enjoyment out of is overcoming a problem and overcoming providing a solution to a situation where there's a challenge effectively, and that was definitely came up with a couple of people. It was a sort of a, well, what the hell can you offer me?
Mm.
And put quite simply back to them over a period of conversations was, well, you have your expertise in your skill set and I have my expertise in my skill set, and if we isolate ourselves and put ourselves in silos, then it will get a certain amount done. But I think if we understand where we're going to help each other out, then we're really going to actually thrive here. So it was really breaking down to put it back to them. It was to break down, well, what do they enjoy doing? They list off what they enjoy doing. And I quite honestly say, right, well, I enjoy doing absolutely none of that, so that's fine, no problem there.
No threat to you.
Yeah, I'm not here to teach you how to be technically a better accountant. You know, that's qualification and experience that you've gained, and you'd certainly get from Nigel. My inputs here are to get people thinking about the commercial aspects of what we're doing, to think about the people that are in the team and how we're going to develop them, how they feel, how we're going to retain staff, and we're going to retain clients by the way we act, and the actions that we take for those individuals. And that really the nucleus around high performance is to have a fairly tight knit team. You know, we don't need to live in each other's pockets and do everything with each other every 5 minutes inside and outside of work, but there needs to be a level of respect for what skills people bring to the table, and there needs to be an allowance for those skills to thrive, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's probably fair to say we've approached it since we started Ad Valorem really with that. You focused really on clients and the technical side, Nigel.
Yeah,
and
absolutely,
It's focused on the people and systems really. And I think now I can see in the profession actually, I think the advent of private equity coming in where they're not accountants that coming in, there's more of it, but perhaps not for the smaller firms. So, you know, I know we do a lot of work with accounting partners, and we have our accounting partner days. And I think they're quite fascinated to talk to you, aren't they, about how you the metrics that we look at and how we structure the team, because we've got a pod structure. So
Yeah, and I think it's interesting enough because when we do the partner days, I think quite a lot of the owner managers, they've already got it in their head what they want to do, but they don't really seem to have the time or the resource to be able to apply and to go after it. I think what Ad Valorem do really well is that we've sat back and said, right, well, if we're going to go and do marketing, we're going to bring in someone in marketing. If we're going to go and do sales, we're going to bring in salespeople to do it. We're not just going to ask partners or managers to go and be everything to everyone. They're very good at being accountants, so let them be accountants. Whereas we've invested in people like myself and people like heads of sales in marketing roles as well. And we've said, look, this is where we want to apply that level of expertise, and that's really important. And I think going back to those owner managers, I think instantly when you talk to them, they have a sense of relief that they're not the only one.
yeah,
You know, they're like, oh, thank God someone actually feels the same way as me. I want to grow the business, or I want to excel over in this particular area. And the question often then goes back, which is, well, effectively, what are you doing about it? And everyone will go, I don't have the time, or I don't have the resources. And it's like, well, it is that age-old thing. If you're not going to change the way you approach it, then the outcome isn't going to change. So again, going back to the point, if you're clear on what the outcome needs to be, you can reverse engineer it back and go, well, how do we achieve it? And it's being disciplined enough to say, yeah, you might have done that for the last 20 years, and that might be pretty good, but it doesn't mean it can't be better.
Mm.
And I think when those questions start to get asked, whether it's accounting partners, whether it's our staff, you know, you face a real challenge there in getting people to change the way they think, because not everyone, but that can really people can put the wall up. They can block off and go, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And can get quite offended by it. And it's a case of going, right, let's just put all egos to the side. Let's have a conversation about what we actually want to do and how can we make it happen. And once they get past that, you're on a really positive road.
What's your proudest achievement so far, would you say?
To be honest with you, I'm used a whole career I've been in a world where there's been outputs for financial results, commercial results, and achieving targets. So I'm kind of just like that. I like to be able to, at the end of a month or a quarter, say to you and Nigel, like, that we've done really well, we've hit the budget we're meant to hit. That's kind of the way I'm wired. I would probably say that one of the biggest achievements I've had at Ad Valorem, you mentioned it earlier on, was being able to sit down with possibly 5, 6 quite very well experienced technical accountants, and over time being able to overcome the initial challenge that lay out, which was how the hell is this going to work?
Yeah.
And to look back over probably the last 18 months, 2 years, and to see the changes that we've made. And I mean, I might be kidding myself here, but they seem quite happy with the way things are going, and they rely on me for support in the areas that I can provide support. And part of the foundation of this was that I'm able to rely back on them as well. So it's a two-way street. It's not just a me thing. It's being able to work with them to gain their support and to be able to provide that back. And that has been probably the biggest one, because that was a challenge in the first instance.
I think for me, yeah, I mean, we've obviously seen that, and I think one of the big things I think that I've seen is your ability to clear silos, and
Yeah.
that's coming on to your point there. Is there's a lot of inherently accountancy businesses practices, because of the technical nature, can go down a rabbit hole to stay there,
Mhm.
and as a result, efficiency, performance, client experience is all here.
Yeah.
But I think for us, what you brought is that ability to, I say, gain trust, and in turn, it's allowed us to be able to ensure that any silos are identified quickly and resolved.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that we've seen that commercially in the business, and I think we've also seen it in our employee satisfaction.
Yeah.
As I say, you're an accepted part of us professional people. Which you've both done that really, really well.
Yeah.
It's really difficult, isn't it? And I think it's always amazed me in the accounting practice world is, we measure on time, people meet people on time, but everybody kind of knows that timesheets are a bit of a fudge to some extent. And I don't know what your take on that is, obviously, because obviously coming from a recruitment background, you're not measured on you're measured on outputs, aren't you, on outcomes, rather than rather than how you spend your time is down to you largely.
Yeah, and I think timesheets are important in their own right, in their own area, and I do understand that, and I think there needs to be.
We have them, yeah.
Yeah, we have them, and we should use them to make sure that we're not going crazy and doing something we shouldn't be doing, or anything like that. But I think more importantly is the method behind them, which is trying to make everyone autonomous with what they're meant to be doing.
Yeah.
Don't just do it because it needs to be done. Figure out a way in which to stop yourself and stop yourself, and then figure out a way in which you can do it better. And I think probably one of the biggest achievements we've had there is that accountants don't seem to want to do anything wrong.
They don't. They don't. No.
And certainly recruitment has people. There's many critics of it, and there's many praises of it, and learned loads of great things out of working in recruitment over the years. And that is to allow yourself to be vulnerable, i.e., if you're stuck, don't just hide it, and don't just put your head down and think, oh, I'll just do what I can do and then see what happens. Just stop.
Yeah.
And everyone should be empowered to ask someone, whether it's a manager, a colleague, or even I don't know, someone more junior, whoever, it doesn't matter. If someone can help you, you should be empowered to say, I don't know how to do that. Please help. And it seems really simple, but I just think it goes a long way for people to say, look, I'm not Mr. Invincible. I can't, Mr. or Mrs. Invincible. I can't do everything on my own. And that kind of lends itself back to the removing the silos. It's like, right, okay, well, if you're working in audit and you think there's a tax problem, don't just try and figure it out. Go and speak to the tax director. Go and speak to the guys in R&D, go and speak to the guys in compliance, and vice versa all the way through.
Yeah, and I guess
it should be as one.
Yeah, and I guess for the smaller practitioners, I think hopefully we can, we do love providing that support for those specialist areas that you can't afford to have when you're a smaller firm. We couldn't afford them.
Yeah.
And I guess they can't afford someone like you. So what would you say to a sort of sole practitioner that's trying to manage the people stuff? And have you got any sort of tips that you can come up with? I might throw you a real curveball here.
No, I mean, I think this is just the way I'd approach it. I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, right? But if I was the way I am, but I was also an accountant and decided to set up my own practice and I had, 5 to 10 people in it, I'm not someone who can see that there's a problem there and do nothing about it. So I would be really focused on making sure that people in the business of all levels are aware of what's required of them.
That's a really good point, actually, because it seems obvious, but I think but it's not, is it? I don't think many firms actually, again, going back to probably time, don't have the time to put that into perhaps a way that people can digest it.
Yeah, it does. And I think a basic example of it is that some people can just see the manager as an area to dump a problem.
Oh, that's good.
And therefore, if you're an owner managed business, you're at the top of the business, therefore become the Mecca dumping ground.
Yeah.
Effectively, and you are just shouldering everyone's issues or problems or challenges. And I think number one, accept that there will always be a challenge. Well, you might go home of one day thinking, "Yep, not to speed with everything. Everything's all in good order." Yeah, tomorrow's not going to give you that luxury. I think so. So you have to accept that there is always going to be those challenges, and you have to figure out a way in which you can spread that level of responsibility. I think too many times though that people think that that's an area just to dump problems. Well, I would see that as a great opportunity for any people leader to put it back to people and say, "What do you think?"
Come up with a solution.
Yeah, because
that was always your mantra, Nigel, actually, wasn't it?
It really is. And I think it's a lot easier for people that turn up to day one of working for an organization and they say, I want to become this, that, the other, and they're really quite ambitious. And there's people that, don't necessarily have that level of drive. I don't think it matters. I think you need to be able to challenge people in a positive way, and that they need to understand that just because you're a manager or a director or a partner, whatever, you need to be able to be clear with them the level of support that you need from them. And that creates a two-way relationship, which I think is a good foundation for trust, so that people can have a positive outlook when they're faced with challenges that they need to handle. And I think that's important. Yeah. Autonomy is massive for me.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's one of the things in accounting, actually. I think a lot of people stay in an accounting practice because they do want that sense of autonomy, which I don't think you necessarily get in industry as much. But what's your take, Nigel?
I think it's variety of work is another reason why people would want to work, working in terms of, autonomy support, having a direct impact, specifically on a business that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford somebody full time. I think you can see changes a lot quicker. I think working in practice and I've done both. I've worked in industry and practice. Both have got pros and cons.
Yeah, to be honest, the way I always, and this is probably harking back to a recruitment world, the whole thing is your own business in your own head. You can fly under whichever banner you want, whether it's Ad Valorem or whatever else. If you're at the point in time where you're considering whatever you do as your own mini business, and you obviously operate within the framework of the organization you work with naturally, but if you take ownership to that level, you are dedicated to making sure that you're identifying things that need to be done to affect things positively, you're in a good place. And I think once you crack that, particularly as a people manager, you really can start to spread that gospel, if you like, and get others to think that way as well, and it creates a really, really positive culture.
But we obviously run with quite low whip lockup on purpose.
So our whip lock is about 17 days, which is
very good.
Yeah.
Obviously now we've brought in audit and more highly technical stuff we do, and bigger projects we do, and we have got more whip than
R&D specifically is always a big whip carrier. Yes.
What's your take on how that should, you'd recommend that process is managed from a people point of view? Because I think, going to your point before about the types of people that are very highly technical, using a Belbin term here, because we use the Belbin team dynamics system. Quite often they're computer finishers, which I think so highly detailed might not necessarily want to do things quickly, because actually their priority is getting things perfect or right. Now I know we've had discussions, haven't we? Because obviously that you're coming from a world of recruitment, which is much more you get the deals done, and it's more
more immediate.
But you've dealt with, it's how you deal with the anxiety that those, because obviously we applaud they want to do a good job. And balancing that with anxiety, because actually the converse to that is if they don't do a good job, they don't do things well or don't do things right, it can create a lot of anxiety. And I think we can all relate to that, So how would you say you've overcome that with?
Well, our audit offering probably was my first foray into the wonderful world of whip, and understanding the mechanics of it, it's straightforward, right? But understanding why those mechanics produce those numbers was slightly baffling to me. So, and you touched on it with probably the completed finishes of the world. We effectively had a situation where quite a hell of a lot of work was started and nothing ever seemed to get finished. And that really blew my mind. Like I'm very outcome driven, and I don't, if you go too far on that, you focus too much on the outcome, and then the quality drops, and then you can have a poor client experience, or you can leave a trail of destruction in your wake. Nobody wants that, so there's a balance. But the first question I asked when I sort of got to grips with this was, why are we finishing the work? Why is work being carried forward and was started in this month and not being picked up again until the following month? And it was because we weren't being particularly disciplined with our own time and with our clients' time.
Was it people pleasing?
Yeah. And in the end, it all became a bit bloody confusing, to be honest. It was like, well, are we providing a service as a valued partner, or are we basically a vending machine that jumps whenever we've got commands punched into it? And I don't mean that in a hostile sense towards a client to say, no, you'll wait until we're ready. But it was a case of taking a step back and going, right, instead of just going through the year and going, we're just going to do these audits as they appear, we are going to operate with a plan 6 months to 9 months in advance of what we need to do. And it wasn't an alien concept. I think a lot of the guys in the team were like, yeah, well, we should be doing that. But again, it was just allowing themselves to step back and make the change. And I'm really pleased to say, actually, I might change my biggest achievement, actually, because this was a pretty big deal.
I thought this was
so I thought this. But that for if I look back to probably 2 years ago, where how organised that audit structure was, it was all over the shop, really. And at this point in time now, we've got very clear and open lines of communication with the clients. It says we're going to be ready to do this in, I don't know, May, June, whichever. Are you going to be ready? And if you're not going to be ready, you need to let us know. We can change on that. And that's one thing, getting the clients organised, but it's another. The main change in responsibility here was on us, which was like, if we say we're going to do this in 6 weeks or in 4 weeks, however long it takes, make sure we get it done.
Yeah.
And that comes again back to perfect planning. Don't say you can have it done in 4 weeks if you know it's going to take you 8 weeks. Like, be honest with yourself and with the client. And more often than not, I think people are probably not afraid to, but reluctant to give a time frame on it because it might pin them to something. Well, what's wrong with being pinned to a deadline? Particularly if you've gone through it in a logical way in which you're going to approach it and go, right, actually, this is when we're going to do it by. That will work. I'm going to put that person on it. We need to make sure that the client's clear exactly what we need, and we'll go and get it done. And they're probably the most organised bunch out of a lot of them now.
Yeah.
If I'm honest.
But I think I would say that you gave them that emotional support in terms of it's okay, you put your arms around them in a metaphorical way, but
yeah,
not hugging.
No hugs forgiven.
No hugging, yeah. But I think it was that it's okay. You were there to support them to do that, and also you did quite a bit of coaching. I think is the way to put it in terms of how to handle clients in because obviously part of what you've done in your previous life is commercial terms with clients. You're negotiating commercial terms, and most clients will understand if you're talking in terms of business.
Yeah,
I think that's you're absolutely right.
It is, isn't it?
Business people will understand a business conversation.
So Neil, obviously, as businesses grow, it gets harder and harder to keep performance. I know we went to listen to Gary Turner once, Nigel. I remember when we were looking at the cloud accounting and talking about keeping an aircraft flying at 35,000 feet and changing an engine, which is what I think we felt we were doing with cloud accounting. And I think you've probably got something like that coming up with AI now.
Yeah.
What's your take on how you can scale and keep your culture and manage the team as well as, because I know we've got to, we're going to be tested on this because obviously we've just done an acquisition and we've got to integrate that acquisition. So I think we're going to be having a bit of a masterclass.
I didn't know the test.
Masterclass.
I think when you.
What's your approach to it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you grow from a team of 5 to 25, or in our case, it's 60, it's now going to be 80.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if anyone gets to a point where they've gone from, I don't know, 5 or 10 to the 50, 60 and north of it, and you're still shouldering everything at once, you're in a spot of bother. I think as you go, and we touched on it earlier on, I think it really is about empowering people to take more responsibility, and it's on the person coaching the empowerment element through to be able to instill those values and those responsibilities and those expectations. That's not easily done. I've found. I think when people are really good at something, it doesn't necessarily mean they're particularly good at parting way with that knowledge. And that, again, that's not a criticism. It's just a lot of people that are in that particular position tend to just naturally go and provide solutions to problems. I think the people in that position that need to allow their managers and other leaders to come through, number one, they've got to be able to trust that those individuals can do what's expected of them, and they need to be able to step back, not to abandon them, but to be there if they need to be leaned on. But you have to manage through your managers. You can't just be all things to everyone all the time. And that's not saying that you've become far too big and important to go and talk to, I don't know, a trainee or an apprentice, but you need to have that same level of consistency through the business. And the only way you're going to do that is by instilling those values so that people understand why they're important, and so that it spreads as a consistent level through a variety of people and not just coming from one or two individuals.
Yeah, because I think we've talked about what the sort of optimum, you don't really want one person managing more than 5, really, do you? What, 5 to 10? Well, 10 would be absolute max, I think.
Yeah, and it depends on the journey that everyone's on. I think it depends what some people don't really have an off button to say that I'm actually at my limit.
Yeah,
I think that's important as well. But yeah, it's keeping things simple and ultimately replicating things that are working and making sure that people understand why they work and why it's important that in that particular area that needs to be maintained. Because if I always say it only takes one bad egg to make a bleep omelette.
Well, I think there's another, isn't it? You tend to play to your lowest player as well. So if
that's an issue with coaching, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know from when I've done coaching with sports coaching, it's very hard. You always tend to coach, particularly if you've got a large group, to the lower level rather than the higher level. It's a natural thing that you have to do.
Yeah, and I think it's just making everyone feel involved with it. I think when you're trying to empower managers to be autonomous and take ownership, you don't ever single anyone out if they're not perhaps doing what you want them to be doing. It needs to be as a collective approach to say, well, this is how we're going to do things as a group, and everyone has to share a load of responsibility in order to get us there, because no one can do it on their own. And I think the solution is pretty simple. The actual actioning of the solution is where the hard work really comes in. It takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. And I have these days where I'm like, oh, am I actually doing this well? And I know that other people have them days when you think, like, they're absolutely fine. But it's being prepared to handle the setbacks that come with it, and just being like, totally normal, relax. What's it that's bothering you? Oh, this is bothering me. Okay, that's fine. Let's talk it through.
Yeah.
And it's just the patience of being able to allow those blips to happen, I think.
But it's kind of, I think, going to your point now, I think it's actually expecting challenges. You expect challenges and you thrive on that.
Yeah.
And I think
I've often said to people when this happens and they're like, why is there always a problem? And you're like, well, welcome to the suck, basically. You don't play football expecting not to be fouled. Yes, you're not allowed to foul. And yes, it's a pain in the backside. And yes, some people will get booked, some people will get sent off, but you have to expect to be fouled at some point. Like, you can't go through it being upset that someone's fouled you, because it's going to happen. And you need to take the take the mindset of, how do I overcome the foul, rather than moan about the foul. It's
helping your team to build resilience, isn't it? I think there's a big talk about that at the moment, is building more resilience in your workforce so that they can take those knocks. It's far too broad to say just toughen up. I'm not saying that, but people should build resilience. They should be able to look back a year prior and go, if that same situation comes up now, am I better positioned to handle it? Yes, I am, and I'm quite comfortable in doing so. And I think there's a joy in that.
Yeah, it's really. I personally find that really rewarding.
Yeah.
And I think probably the final point on that from me is, on that journey with people going into that, like, allow yourself to give yourself the win. Like, don't just, I'm someone who likes to continue to take on new challenges, and that's great. But sometimes you really sit back and just go, actually, you did that quite well. I mean, don't make I'm not someone who make a big song and dance about it, but it's quite nice to look back and go, oh, if that situation came up a year ago, I laugh about it now. But actually, I now know how to handle it, and that I find that quite rewarding. And I say that to the guys that I lead and I manage. Give yourself a break. You've done a good job.
Yeah.
Look back and then look how you'd handle it going forward.
I think I saw you write yesterday, Rome wasn't built in a day.
No, certainly wasn't. No.
So you write that to someone yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, Neil. So this is the quick fire round. Some strategic takeaways for the viewers. What's one metric every manager should be tracking?
Outputs.
Okay.
Good one. And biggest mistake you see when it comes to performance management?
Not allowing people to fail when they take on a challenge.
Excellent.
Okay. And finally, one thing that leaders could do to improve team performance.
Work out what you want in terms of your output and your performance, and then before you go in and start putting solutions in place, understand the team that you're dealing with and how you're going to communicate that to them.
Neil, thanks very much for your time. It's been really informative. If you've enjoyed this session, please feel free to drop us a note and subscribe at the button below. We'll see you for the next podcast.